What's the most memorable way you've ever quit, got fired from a job? Years ago, my boss left and I took over his job managing a department of 40 people. I was given a raise, but not a title because according to my new boss Pengo, you don't have the managerial skill required. I have never even seen you give a PowerPoint. It was clearly an age discrimination thing, because I used to give presentations all the time. So I resigned the next week during my one-on-one meeting with my boss, via PowerPoint. Nice presentation, animation and all. I hate PowerPoint. The fact that your new boss felt that PowerPoint presentation skills was a major cornerstone for a manager should tell you everything you need to know right there. Worked as a dishwasher for a very abusive manager. Lots of yelling, constantly being accused of stealing the food, hours not counted, etc. Right before lunch I convinced the other 2 dishwashers to bail. All 3 of us walked out 10 minutes before the lunch rush. Friends told us the manager was back there washing dishes and screaming profanities. As a former dish B4 and butthole, I salute you. Lost my job. Got fired rather unexpectedly. In my mad scramble, I got a job at a reputable car dealership which started all their new guys out of their trashy looking used dealership down the street. I know nothing about cars. Is this going to be a problem? No. We will show you the ropes before you set foot on the lot. They didn't. Actually, they refused to, because the 5-man sales team was so competitive they sabotaged me within hours. Stole my desk phone. My chair ended up in a ditch behind the building. The story climaxes with a customer asking what I know about a car and me responding with "It's purple. You like purple, don't you?" laughing with the customer and then walking to the office. If I made you any money today it was on accident, but you can keep it just the same. I quit. And I did. How did you even get that job in the first place? Oh. I drove forklifts for 6 years at a large food warehouse distribution facility. The bosses promised me a position in the IT department, but every year they would say how they needed me where I was. My grandmother passed away and left me $200k. I walked into my boss's office, asked if they had any IT positions open. They said no again, so I quit. I went back to college and am now a successful web developer. Thanks grandma. Good gal grandma. RIP. Not me, but some friends' co-workers. The company was laying off folks, and we all knew it was coming, but the way they did it was so asinine. Over the loudspeaker, they would call someone to the conference room, which was where they were let go, after the 3rd or 4th call, and none of them coming back. Everyone realized what was going on. When the little noise happened that indicated the speaker was on, everyone cringed and waited to hear the name called. It was devastating for each person called to walk to the conference room with everyone else watching with knowing, sad eyes. Execs took a lot of crap in the ensuing months for this crappy method. My friend used to work at Tim Hortons, a Canadian coffee, I use that word lightly, chain. He had only been there a few weeks, and he hated it. While working drive-thru, he gave a customer his complicated drink order. The customer tasted it and then shoved it back in the window, spilling it, and yelled, "How fricking hard is it to get my order right?" My friend picked up the big baskets of jelly-filled donuts and started dumping them into the customer's car, yelling, "Did I get your fricking order right this time?" That was the end of that. I used to unload delivery trucks at the mall. I quit with the usual letter of resignation and 2 weeks notice, but the guy who replaced me got fired in a rather spectacular way. When I worked at the mall, I would arrive at 4 in the morning, before anyone else. I had the alarm code and keys to the store to let myself in. Twice a week, the delivery truck would include a shipment for the jewelry department. This tub was like a plastic version of a pirate's chest. Thousands of dollars in gold and diamonds. Oh, and the idiot store manager left the security cameras off all night to save electricity. Sadly, my parents raised me to have a guilt complex. I mean, morals. So I never stole anything. I just quit to go back to school. A month later, I hear that the guy who replaced me got fired. I assumed he had done what I'd always thought about, tossing a tub of jewelry out the loading dock. Nope. Instead, he decided to steal a cheap set of luggage. At noon, when the cameras were on, by carrying it out through the store, in front of all his co-workers and hundreds of customers. I have no idea why he thought that would work. friend of mine got fired from a drugstore in high school. One of our regular customers, a cantankerous old woman, arrives at the register with a handful of items and proceeds to be at my friend for a variety of reasons. Our prices were too high, we didn't extend our sales long enough, there wasn't enough parking, etc. As high school student cashiers, none of these things were in our control. This particular day, as she finishes her bitching and he bags up her purchases, he says, "Mom, did you forget your polydent?" The old woman looked bemused and said, "Polydent? I don't buy that. What makes you think I forgot that?" My friend replies coolly, "I was just thinking that with the way your gums are flapping up here, we wouldn't want you to lose your teeth. Now would we?" She was speechless. He was promptly relieved of his job. Flawless victory. In the late 90s, some college friends and I started a site called quit4you.com. We'd call your boss and deliver a singing telegram letting them know that you quit. We'd also break up with you so that way. It was fun. I worked for my high school, and I was on their payroll. I was a cameraman, and I was filming a budget meeting. As I was in the room filming, they were listing off who they were laying off, and they read off my name. I was once standing next to an ex-GF when her friend asked her when she was breaking up with her BF. Me, I think I understand how you felt. Pretty late to the party, but here goes. The most memorable way of leaving a job I had was being told, "I'm selling the company in 2 months. I wanted to let you know so you have time to look for another job. Here's a letter of recommendation I wrote for you. Please let me know if you need help finding a new job." Having every other employer effectively pull the rug out from under me when it comes to letting me go. The fact that my employer actually spoke to me like a reasonable human being to inform me of something that he had no stake in speaks volumes of his character. It's sad that this sort of thing isn't generally expected of most workplaces. I worked in a newspaper company. There came the time when they started firing people, cause they said there wasn't enough money to pay everybody. One of the girls in my office was supposed to get fired and she was devastated, cause it was hard to find a job in the field in my city. I was about to move to Canada, so I went to the boss and told her I'd quit 2 months earlier than I intended to if the girl could continue to work there. So we made a deal and she's still there, 2 years later. Or, that gave me a happy. I got fired for feeding the homeless. I worked at a Mexican joint and one day a tray of chicken ended up overcooking a bit so it was dry. As the manager prepared to toss it out, I asked him if I could give it to the homeless people panhandling a block away. He agreed that it was the right thing to do. He gave me a company hat to wear, some napkins, to-go containers and forks, and I went out in the street and passed out chicken to the homeless and anyone else who looked hungry. Apparently one of the people I fed was a journalist who wrote an article in the Peps about me the next day. It was great PR. The journalist wrote about how great this restaurant was for doing a kind thing like that. Later that day the owner walked in, asked me about it and fired me on the spot, even though I had the manager's permission to do it. That owner was in butthole and an idiot. I was shocked, but it didn't get me down. I was glad to lose my job if it meant doing the right thing. I was working a busy Friday night server shift at an AZ Mexican restaurant when I stepped into the kitchen to explain a special order to the chef. Something to do with allergies, I recall. I did so in Spanish as it was the chef's main tongue when one of the managers yells at me to speak English. I'd typically brush it off, but I was still miffed from a previous statement he'd made, so I ask him why. He tells me that it bothers the customers, of which I agreed but expressed that we were in the kitchen where there are no customers to be bothered and that it was easier to explain a potential medical issue to someone in a manner they can clearly understand. He went off on the most cliche rant about speaking English in America, concluding with, "As long as you work for me you will speak English," to which half the kitchen staff, a witnessing bartender, another server, and I walked out on. We walked to the restaurant across the street where the kitchen staff had a second job and witnessed the Friday night implosion of our previous employer over drinks. My only regret was the heck we left our remaining co-workers in that night. I really wish I knew Spanish. I feel like I missed out on a lot not being able to talk to the cooks at my McDonald's jobs. They were rad dudes. A friend of mine worked as a server at a now defunct chain restaurant. I don't recall how, but he had the manager off, so the hostesses had been told not to seat anybody in his section. He decides that today is the day and begins seating people in his section himself. He fills his tables, takes all their orders, serves them all their food. When the first table asks for their check, he says he'll be right back with it and walks out the door and drives away. He called another friend of ours that was working the kitchen and told him what had just been done, but not to tell anybody. Apparently it was close to 45 minutes before any of the tables complained. They all got their meals comped. My last job, they told me once a month for 7 months that I probably won't be staying. Finally, on the 8th month, they said they were going to let me go. It took them 3 more months to finally get rid of me, and 2 more months after that before they stopped paying me. Thanks, US Navy. Good night, Wesley. Good work. Sleep well. I'll most likely kill you in the morning. This wasn't me. However, a guy at my old office let himself in early one morning, lugged the manager's desk and favorite chair up to the roof and set them both on fire. I'll set the building on fire. I wasn't the one that quit, but I will never forget this. My first day working at Dunkin' Donuts. I was trying very hard to just stay out of people's way during the morning rush. The franchise owners were there, so I was even more on my best behavior. Let's call them Bill and Grace. They seemed nice, but so did everyone else. I was ringing people out when Grace noticed we were running low on croissants. She asked some dude, let's call him Steve, to go in the back and get another tray. Steve stops dead in his tracks, slowly turns around and yells at the top of his lungs, "You know what, frick you. Grace, frick your croissants, frick this shithole place." There was a lobby full of customers. All noise and movement stopped. Everyone was shocked. I'm fairly sure he was heard through the drive-through speaker. Steve wasn't finished. He went to the back, ripped the trays of bagel toppings off the wall, sending various seeds everywhere, still yelling about this freaking place. Bill started walking toward him, so Steve hopped over the counter, kicked over a customer's order and ran into the parking lot. Still yelling, he stripped to his boxers, threw his uniform on the ground and started jumping on them. Then he got into his car and drove off. And that day, it was discovered that Steve laced various powder donuts with a potent mix of PCP and C. The end. At McDonald's a while back, I worked with one of my best friends. He was getting written up for eating on the line again. This was like his 5th write-up in the last month, so it was pretty clear that he was going to get fired. So as the overly pudgy manager gets in his face about eating on the line, he takes the half of fillet of fish he was eating and I crap you not, he shoves it in her mouth and ran out of the store. I never laughed so hard in my life. Your buddy is a legend. I snapped. I ripped off my apron, told the owner of the shop to go frick himself and stormed out. The owner was my dad. There was an awkward vibe at home for a few days. That was 12 years ago. We laugh about it now. Never work with family. You expect them to help you out, but instead they whip you like a bad rap song. This is nothing too crazy, but I enjoyed it. So I'm in high school, working in a large high-end sporting goods store. No basketballs or baseball bats. We're talking ski ice, bikes, North Face jackets, running gear, etc. I was in the bikes department. I'd already handed in my 2 weeks notice, so I'm pretty elated to go in for my last shift, which was on a Sunday when the fewest number of managers were around. We had 3 store managers. 2 of them were anal. One was chill as frick. Well, it just so happened that chill as frick is the only one in this day. No floor managers on Sundays, just department managers. So we're sitting around getting our morning prep, and I notice my anal hard butt department manager is nowhere to be seen. After morning prep is done, chill as frick walks up to me. "Hey, Kernication, anal hard butt is sick today. You're the most senior in the department, so you're in charge. Number freaking way." Picture this, me, still in high school, working for a fancy butt store with tons of anal bosses, and for the first time ever I get to run the show. So what do? Triple breaks for everyone. Everyone in my department got 2 lunch breaks and unlimited coffee breaks. I just made sure there was at least a handful of people on the floor at all times. We had this vintage style lowrider bike in the department. 10 minutes into my shift I ride over to the water cooler, and chill as frick is there. Crap, what's he gonna say, me thinks. Oh man, I love that bike, seriously? He didn't give a crap. I rode that 2-wheeled pimp mobile around the store all freaking day. Chatted with friends in different departments. flirted with the cute girls. They were all cute. Avoided customers like the plague. No, I didn't go down in a blaze of glory, but my god was it the best last day I've ever worked anywhere. Nice story, and excellent change of pace from the rest of this thread. I used to be employed at Best Buy circa 2005. It was the worst freaking job I have ever had. Fast food. Manual labor. It's a cakewalk compared to trying to sell people magazines and product service plans they don't need. The worst evil frick the customer over retailer in business. Anyway, that aside, this is the story of how I parted ways with the company. Christmas time was coming up, Xbox 360 was just about to be released and Best Buy did a promotion with McDonald's where if you got a value meal it came with Best Buy bucks attached to the cups. Think evil retailer meets Monopoly. They were the most annoying freaking thing in the history of promotions. No one used them correctly and everyone was they weren't apparently liable to taxes. Anyway, I was a rep 1, cashier, and I just started my shift. I take the first person in line who is buying some crappy camera. Oh look, she pulls out $150 worth of Best Buy bucks. Per company policy I have to shut down my register, take her driver's license and go to the back office to make a copy of it to send to McDonald's corporate. Employees are banned from the promotion. So I come back to my register, count my drawer and begin the transaction. The computer system was super slow and each Best Buy buck had to be scanned individually, then wait 15 seconds to pop on the screen, then you scan the next. So basically my life was beep, wait, beep, wait, beep, 150 times. And that is for a single transaction. So the customer, bored out of her mind, decides to call her boyfriend and tell him how retarded I am because I am making her wait so long, as if there is anything I can do about it. So 30 minutes into my shift I've done one transaction. Second customer comes up with another crappy camera. I think we had a special sale on them with around $200 worth of Best Buy bucks. Same thing, beep, wait, beep, wait, beep. This guy has a remaining balance for the tax and is furious the government won't accept Best Buy bucks as tender for the taxes he owes on purchasing that camera. Again I'm called retarded and he demands to speak to the manager. Dude, you just got $200 bucks off a camera for being a fat freaking butthole and you are complaining about taxes? So the manager calms him down and he is convinced we are all retards. Now over an hour on my shift and only seeing 2 customers, this freaking guy slaps another freaking camera on the counter with another set of 200 individual Best Buy bucks in a Ziploc baggie. I lost it, grabbed a handful of the Best Buy bucks out of the baggie and threw them in the air like confetti and yelled frick this and walked out. I've never had a feeling like that again in my life. Was amazing. The look on the fat frick's face I'll remember till the day I die. TLDR. Frick Best Buy. I was a car saleswoman at a dealership in a very affluent county, but it was very near a rather poor area populated by many day laborers and their families. Our dealership did some extremely predatory financing tricks just to get people in cars and off the lot to get the highest sales figures possible. During my first week, a young Hispanic family comes in wanting to buy a new minivan. I can already tell the finance sharks are moving, and because this family is desperate for a good, reliable car, we would not have even been able to accept their beat up trade-in. I knew they would sign anything put in front of them and they would end up losing their new minivan and their large cash down payment within 3 months. I made a few calls to another dealership and found them a much better deal on a reliable used minivan with a reasonable interest rate and sent them on their way while my finance manager was prepping their paperwork. The manager came back, the family was gone and I got bitched out but not fired. Yet, the feeling of satisfaction I got from helping this family was far greater than the $200 commission I would have received that I knew I had found my path. I was so disgusted by the people I was working for that I decided to do this every single time someone was about to get steamrolled. It took about 4 months for the managers to catch me in the act of calling other places and arranging ethically sound sales. It was all worth it when I was called in for the biggest, loudest, most pissed-off employee review I have ever received. I patiently waited through the owner's rant, the general manager's rant, the finance BS rant and the sales manager's rant. Then I pulled out and started reading from the book where I kept track of every family that I had saved from a terrible, predatory deal, and I listed what they paid to other dealerships and their jaws collectively dropped. Sure, it was less money than these buttholes would have scammed, but I had helped 87 people not get screwed and get safe, reliable, affordable cars, and I got to laugh in my boss's faces and call them all heartless scumbags preying on the naive and poor. The amount was close to $250,000. The owner's final words were, "You are so freaking fired," and I replied, "It took you dumbasses long enough to figure it out." Ha, smiled, laughed and walked out. I high-fived my 2 mechanic friends who were amongst the small crowd of employees that had gathered outside of the conference room because everyone had heard the yelling. Everyone else just looked pretty sheepish and scattered. I understood that they couldn't risk their own sales jobs by associating with me in any way after that. By far, it was one of the proudest moments of my life. It was the only time I have ever been fired from a job, and it felt awesome. I quit my job as a hostess at McCormick and Schmick's Seafood Grill last year because my boss wouldn't let me leave to see my dying best friend in his last moments. I came into work that morning and went about my usual duties. My mind was already occupied with the thoughts of seeing my friend of 11 years laying in the hospital bed barely conscious. He had been fighting cancer that rapidly spread throughout his body within a few months. About half an hour into being at work, I received a text saying, "Come to the hospital. He only has a couple hours left." My heart sank. I ran to my manager at the front lobby and told him the situation and that I needed to leave to see him immediately. I asked him to ask the other hostess to cover me. He asked me, "Is your family member in the hospital?" I responded, "No. He's my best friend of 11 years. My oldest friend." My fat, sexist, comb-over sporting boss said, "Well, then that's not that big of a concern. He's just a friend. You need to realize that no matter what happens to your friend, the world is going to move on. You need to decide whether or not you want to work here anymore." In complete shock and disgust, I told him that I was leaving and walked out with my head and middle finger held up high. Obviously that man doesn't understand the meaning of friendship and relationships. My friend did pass away that day, and I am glad that I left that crappy job. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the chance of saying my last goodbyes to him. A luxury that is denied to many. He was 27. TLDR. Boss told me I had to decide whether I wanted to see my friend on his deathbed or keep my job. My first job was a manager at Taco Bell. I was like 17 and had no job experience. All of the crew were older than me and didn't respect me at all. I was a crappy manager. One night we were bored. At around 11:30 we were finishing up an order and one of the crew members pulled out the sour cream gun and shot it at me. We had an awesome food fight. They put sour cream and guacamole in guns. What did they expect? My district manager showed up an hour later and told me he had watched the whole thing. I was fired on the spot. TLDR. I was fired while covered in white stuff. Not me, but a co-worker. This was at Publix, a grocery store for you northerners. My co-worker was a REM addict. We worked the 4 AM to 2 PM shift stocking the shelves. One day he came in high as a kite and got into a huge shouting match with the manager in the front of the store. The store was closed, so there were no customers, but it was really loud and quite comical. He ended the rant with "F this I quit," ripped off his name badge, threw it down and stormed out. This all happened at about 4:20 in the morning. At about 10 AM he walked back into the store, in uniform, and quietly started working his shift like nothing had happened. It took about 20 minutes for management to figure out what was going on before he was escorted out of the store. To this day I am still not sure if he just had no idea what happened that morning at 4 AM or if he did remember and tried to play it off. When I am retired, I'm going to go get random jobs at chain stores and fast food places so I can reenact everything posted in this thread. With the economy moving in the direction it is, you may actually need those small jobs after you retire. My bosses incurred some liability for my health problems due to mismanagement, so I got to walk away from my last job with a year's severance pay. Kinda long, sorry. I worked as a Panera midnight baker, which wasn't a bad job for the first year or so, but then it went downhill fast. I had called off to take care of my GF, who was so sick that I was afraid I might have to take to the emergency room. And when I came back the next night, one of the store managers got all in my face about how that's not an excused absence. Fine, whatever, write me up. Then my bakery manager, dumb redneck, goes over the incident again and reiterates that this is not an acceptable reason to call off. I tell him, man, it's not like I was just going to leave her. We don't have anybody close to us that lives less than 4 hours away. My family is the most important thing to me. He then tells me, well heck, it's not like she's your wife or thin as a lesbian. This really freaking pee me off because we'd be married if we could. Whatever. A few days later, I found out that the store manager had written me up 5 times for the same offense and forged the bakery manager's name on the slips. If an employee refused to sign a disciplinary slip, you had to get 2 witnessing managers to also sign it. So she found 2 other managers to sign these things and put them in my file. I didn't even know about it until someone felt guilty and came clean. When I asked my bakery manager what he was going to do about it, he hemmed and hawed and confessed that he wasn't going to have them thrown out because it would damage store integrity. What the fricking frick? After he left, me and my co-worker gleefully shoved everything into the cooler and got the frick out of Dodge. There was nothing baked for the day when the employees got there. Crappy managers had to frantically try to bake things that were supposed to be rising for the past 5 hours. None of them actually know how to bake the stuff, so they're frantically trying to consult manuals and generally racing around like the Keystone Cops. The bread looks like crap. The little quiche things look like crap. Customers are incensed at no pastries and bagels. The moral of the story? Don't frick with the only people who know how to do things. TLDR. Insult my gay relationship and no one gets bagels. A lose-lose situation. There was an alcoholic pill popper named Mike that worked in the dairy department at our grocery store. One morning, he walked into work and put half a Jack Daniels bottle into his locker. We could smell the alcohol on his breath, so we deduced that he drank the other half. I told him to go home before a manager saw him, but he refused and went to work anyways. Fast forward an hour, and I have a customer that needs help in the dairy department. This was a small grocery store, so we only had one person working in the dairy department at a time. I page Mike to come and help the customer, and go my own way. 5 minutes later, the customer tells me that Mike hasn't helped her yet. Almost immediately afterwards, I have a customer tell me that he can't open the door to the bathroom because it feels like something is pressing against it. Oh crap. It turned out Mike passed out in the men's bathroom, and his weight was pressed against the door. The manager calls 911. Fire department shows up to open the door. Ambulance comes to check the guy out, and the cops show up later because he was getting belligerent. He got fired on the spot. A month later, I start another job working in the air, and none other than Mike is the security guard there. I have no idea how the hospital hired him, but I'm guessing he took a class or went to rehab so the incident wouldn't be on his record. TLDR. Employee passes out in bathroom, fire dept, ambulance, and cops show up. He gets fired on the spot. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.